Good morning, Doug.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good.
It's strange to sit right next to you
It's
like this, right?
very strange.
Yes. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to take a minute and give people the opportunity to join. So this is the second year that we've been doing these Taking Our Faith to Work series. We always do them in the springtime.
Mm-hmm.
Still a little bit cold out there, but we have faith. And this year we actually already have 4 in the planning. So we're going to go all the way to June with our Taking Our Faith to Work series. And we've got some exciting people coming up. James Joh in a minute. And we've got Edmund Weger from Global Affairs Canada. James Bruin from Faith at Work is coming. Julian Lowe works for MasterCard. Very privileged for her to join us as well. So great that you're joining us today. Yeah, so there is something about having a story and sharing that story. We call it a testimony, but in the end of the day, it's just, what is your story? And what does that mean? Taking your story, sharing your story about what it means to live out your faith at work. So this is the first of 4. Welcome for you to register for the upcoming ones as well. Yeah, if you're in a prayer group and you haven't made contact with One Way Ministries and with the Workplace Network, yeah, please feel free to just write me an email or any one of us on the team. So I'm going to actually ask you, Doug, if you could open for us in prayer, and then following that, we're going to hand it over to Jennifer and to James, and for them to take it further.
Away. Father, thank you for us being able to get together like this. Thank you for there's a sense of a new season that we're moving into, and even the joy of just being able to sit beside Johan as close as we are, thinking back to a year ago of how hard that was. So Lord, with this new season, with this still times of uncertainty, with business kind of all over the place, we come to you, Lord, and we recognize that our own personal faith needs to be strong. We need to be strong in you and confident in you, and not do anything out of duty or earning, but rather we come because we're filled with you, and out of the overflow, we can bring it to the workplace. So thank you for James. Thank you for his testimony. Thank you for how you've inspired him and moved so powerfully in him. And we look forward to hearing his words of encouragement that you give him to share. So Lord, thank you. Thank you for each person that's joined in and for their place in the workplace. We bless them and pray that they'll be encouraged and strengthened today through Jesus. Amen.
Thanks, Doug and Johan. And I just join in welcoming everybody here. And it's really my privilege to be able to introduce James Joh to all of you. I have met him and spoken to him numerous times over the last couple of months, and I'm just really impressed with the heart that he has. And his desire really is to express God's heart. So just as way of introduction, James is the founder of Avoda Leadership, and he's also a director at Whitestone Canada, which is a ministry that assists ex-offenders reintegrate back into society. And James is married to Ju, and together they have a son, Evan, who is gorgeous. But at 13 months, he's a real going concern. And as will be really apparent to all of you soon, James is a really authentic and humble leader. He's passionate about integrating his faith and work, and in sharing his experiences and his unique perspective on bringing God's kingdom to our workplace. So please join me in welcoming James. You can do the little applaud motion. And just before I start to engage James in a conversation, I wanted to reiterate to you, and I'm not sure Johan mentioned this, our outline for today and for all the speakers is I'm going to have a conversation with James and ask him some questions. We're going to leave hopefully about 10 minutes for you to ask questions. So if, as he's talking, if there's questions that you have for him, please put them in the chat function and Johan will monitor that. Then we're going to go into a short breakout group, 8 minutes. People have told us that they really value that to meet other people. And you'll have an opportunity just to share what's one insight you're taking away from what James has shared today. So with that bit of an introduction, James, I'm just going to get you to start by sharing just a little bit of your story with us.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. I'm so honored to be here. But for me, just to tell you my story, I was born and raised in South Korea, and my family immigrated to Vancouver, Canada when I was 13 years old. And once I got there, God really took hold of me after I graduated from high school. And I studied criminology in my university years. And then I wanted to become an RCMP officer at one point, and God closed that door. And it sent me and allowed me to work in a marketplace. So I worked at an outdoor hiking equipment company for 6 years. And while I was there, I also served as a youth pastor at a local church, and also studied seminary school. And in 2019, I came to Ottawa with my wife, and we started a new journey, a new chapter here in the city.
Thanks, James. And it was while you were the general manager at that outdoor equipment company, Hill Sound, that you began to get a real vision of what it means to bring God's kingdom to your workplace. Can you share with us, first of all, how you struggled with that at the beginning with your new job and with that, and then how God began to work in you? So can you share a bit of that testimony with us?
Yeah, for sure. So it was a really tough journey for me. And as I shared with you guys a little bit about my story, I didn't really have a business background. I studied criminology and I wanted to become a police officer. So every experience that I had was kind of geared towards that. And when God put me there to work, I started first as a retail supervisor. And then within 2 years, I was promoted to general manager of the entire company, overseeing not only just the retail side, but also the manufacturing side of the office and the business. So for me, the first 2 to 4 years was just a steep learning curve. So I was learning and it was really challenging for me, but not just that, but something that I really struggled with was this question: what does it mean to bring God's kingdom into my workplace? The reason why I was really struggling with that is because for me, faith meant everything. That was my first priority of my life. And whether I was at church or my personal lives or prayer movements that I was so involved with, my faith was expressed in one way or another everywhere I go. But except when I opened that door of my office, whenever I walked into the office of the workplace, I just felt my faith is just irrelevant. Like, what's my faith got to do with my work? I just couldn't solve that problem, that question. So I really struggled with that for a good 4 years when I was working at Hill Sound. And, during that time, there's about close to 2 years of a span where I thought about actually quitting my job because I was so frustrated. Mm-hmm. So I actually talked to some of the pastors that I knew I trusted and I, seek for their advice. And funny enough, everybody said was hey, James, you have a call upon your life. You should go full-time studying a seminary and go full-time ministry in the local church. But there's something deep in my heart where God was saying, no, that's not it. That's not it. And I didn't know exactly what, but I just knew that wasn't the path for me that God was leading me to. So I just stick with my job and I just continued to work. And fast forward 4 years into my job, I had this breakthrough moment in my life. So at the church that I was attending at the time in Vancouver, we had this weekend called Identity Exchange. And we had some guest speakers came over. And long story short, what happened in that event was God revealed to me what is my greatest fear. And that greatest fear was inadequacy, that I'm not good enough. And towards the end of that weekend, what God told me is, my new identity, the true identity, the way how God sees me, not the way how I see myself, not the way how my boss sees me or my staff sees me, right? But the way how God sees me. And this is what he said. He said, James, you are a force for my kingdom. That's what he said to me. And that moment when my fear of inadequacy was replaced by the new identity of force for God's kingdom, everything changed. Everything. And nothing else changed, like surrounding wise, like my office, my staff members, all the relationships that I had, everything was the same, but my perspective have completely changed. And that was the beginning, the beginning of this journey of living out God's kingdom into the workplace. So I remember coming off.
Pause there just one sec, because one thing that I want to observe is I've heard you tell the story 3 or 4 times. And every time I hear you, your face lights up with this joy as you tell this moment when you went from that place of insecurity, or some of us may even call it, sometimes we suffer from the imposter syndrome. And then you knew that you were a force for God's kingdom. I just want to share with you, you light up every time you get to that point. So sorry, continue.
Yeah. So I still remember coming home after that weekend. And I remember I was sitting down on the sofa with my wife, and we're just talking about how this weekend has impacted our lives. And I remember I couldn't go to sleep that night until like 3, 4 a.m. because I was in this mode of dreaming. I was in this mode of dreaming with God, that I all of a sudden was able to, it was almost like something has lifted off, like this cap was just lifted off now. And I was able to dream and think in a way that I never thought about before. So that night I started to just download, like, oh, this could happen in my workplace. I can do this, do that. And all these ideas start to flow into my head. So I went to sleep that night after like around 4 a.m., I think, and then woke up in the morning. And then that Monday morning, I went into the office. And when I went there, it was a whole new world. Yeah, that's how it happened.
Okay, so you got us on the edge of our seats. What happened? Your workplace was the same, the building was the same, the employees were the same, but you changed. So you opened that door on Monday morning. What happened?
So I remember, I vividly remember. So even before I opened the door, when I was grabbing onto the knob of the door, my heart was pumping. I was so excited. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what this is gonna look like, but this is so exciting. I opened it, and I was the first person in the office walking into that space. And all the desks that was lined up and our offices inside of our building, it was exactly the same, but it was so different. And my relationship, the way how I saw the desk and the chairs was different. The way how I connected with our meeting space was different. And I started to just naturally, out of overflowing, I started to pray for every desk, every chair, before any of the staff members come into our workplace, right? And then that morning, we would have the Monday morning meeting at 9 a.m. So, and I lead that meeting, obviously. So everybody's there and we're gathering. And I said this, hey guys, something have changed over the weekend. And because it impacted my life so much, this is gonna bring change and make difference the way how I connect with you guys, the way how I lead you guys, the way how we're gonna work together, right? So I told them that, and then they were just locked into my eyes, because I think what happened was they saw my conviction in my heart. So I said this, but I really want to invest in you guys' lives, like not just as a manager and an employee relationship, but beyond that. And I want to do everything in my ability, my resources, my authority, my capacity, my time. I want to invest into you guys so that you guys can live as how you are created to live. That was the whole thing that God has given me the heart for. I want to help you guys to live in your original design. And I said this, I said, but there's one thing I need from you guys in order for me to do that. And that one thing is, I need your permission. I need your permission. And when I asked that question, everyone, it was like just locked in and they were just nodding. They're like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's what happened the Monday morning. Yeah.
So fast forward, and I think you shared with me too, you told them on that Monday morning, like, something has changed and everything's changed for me. And you asked them for permission and you wanted to invest in them. But you also said, because God had downloaded all of this to you, but you still weren't exactly sure how to make it work on a day-to-day basis. So you asked for permission. I don't know exactly what it means, so give me 2 weeks. And they did. So you obviously already had built up some kind of trust with them. So now tell us what happened, James. What did you do differently that others maybe can learn from and can apply in their workplace? How did you change? How did your leadership change? How did some of your practices change in your interactions with the people on your team?
Yeah, couple of things. Mainly, 2 things was my relationship with my staff. One-on-one relationships have completely changed. And then the other thing was culture of the company. But first of all, the one-on-one individuals. So what I decided to do was I created this personal/professional one-on-one development meetings on a weekly basis with each of our staff members in our office. So what would happen in this meeting is that we wouldn't just talk about work task related topics, but I started to really dig deeper into who they are and what's in their heart. So I asked them questions like, hey, what is your greatest fear? What is your shame and guilt that you deal with like everyday basis? What is your passion? What is your life goal? What is your identity? Who are you? Right? So these are some of the questions I really asked them intentionally in these meetings. Obviously, I built trust with them first and had this time of getting to know each other and all that. But as we grew in our trust, I started to ask them these intentional questions. And from these conversations, what would happen is they would start sharing some of the deep things that they never really thought about or they never really shared with anybody else. So some of the people started to share about their depression, right? And what they're really dealing with. And even when they're coming to work, that's something that they're dealing with. Some of the people were like genuinely had no passion for work or just in general or for their life. And they didn't know where this was coming from. But as I was asking them the deep questions, they realized, like this came from actually my comparison with my friends, my money issue, and all these deep things started to come out into the surface, right? So this one-on-one sessions, it was very exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time because I didn't know what it was going to look like. But some of the people that I worked with, they actually was able to start listening to God's voice through our sessions. That we took time to pray and ask God, like, is there anything that you want to reveal to us, to this person? And they would actually ask and they'll receive something. And sometimes they'll just cry because it touched their heart so much, right? So these one-on-one sessions were really the core of what I did and how God started to manifest and work through me and allow me to experience what it means to bring God's kingdom into the workplace. Yeah.
And James, you had shared that when you asked for permission, you also said to people, my faith is really important to me, and you asked for permission to share some of your faith journey with them. And you didn't work with a bunch of mature, dedicated Christians, and you had the trust in the relationship that people allowed you to do that. And I know from our conversations, you didn't ram anything down your throat. It was It was an invitation to them, of which some picked up on. And I think we've heard from other speakers too, of how building trust and trusting relationships is really important. And I think what we hear you saying is that you demonstrated genuine care for them as people, and you wanted them to live into all that God had created them to be. They weren't just employees to you; they were God's brothers and sisters that you were investing into.
Exactly. So if I want to say one thing about that, so before this breakthrough happened, for me, what happened was, before this breakthrough, all I could think about when it comes down to bringing God's kingdom to the workplace, it was about, okay, how can I slip the name of Jesus here and there? And how can I preach the gospel whenever there's an opportunity? But now, it was after this breakthrough, it was a completely different way of approaching this. It wasn't about just bringing the gospel message to the workplace. It was really seeing each and every one of them that I work with through God's lens, and to see how God created them to live and how God created them to be. And I really see that, and then sow into them and investing into them. So it became a lot more creative and more flexible, more approachable, and more natural. Because before, I think I felt like very robotic, rigid. I feel like I need to follow a certain format, but now it was a whole different world. Yeah.
Yeah, it came through you because of your relationship with God, and you invited him, I was going to say you invited him into your workplace with you, but that's wrong. He was there, and you weren't working for him. You were co-laboring, I think is the term you used, right? You were working together in your workplace.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think that's one of the keys, is that what I realized was that God doesn't want us to just work for him, but his heart is he wants to work with us. And that was a key difference, is that God actually wants to partner with us at work and allow, so in other words, workplace, bringing our faith to work, in other words, means that we're having a whole different experience with God at our workplace. So our experience with God is going deeper and deeper and deeper as we live out this lifestyle. So workplace now becomes a place where we encounter God, not just a place where we try to do something for God, right? Yeah.
So James, I have a quick question, then I'm going to open it up to the floor. But I also want to leave a bit of time for you to talk about, why did you pick the name of Voda for your company? Because it's very meaningful into the topic here. But just quickly, as you talk, you make it sound easy, but it wasn't really easy. So share with us, tell us about where you struggled and how you overcame that.
I mean, it's still not easy. Like, after all these years, like, it's still not easy, and it's hard. And I shared with you that Monday morning after the breakthrough happened. The crazy thing was, when I woke up that morning, alarm went off, and I opened my eyes. I was still lying in bed. The first thought that came through my mind was this: James, how are you going to do that? Are you kidding me? Do you think they're going to listen to you? You're just daydreaming. What are you doing? But when that thought, it was scary to think about that. That was the first thought that came through my mind. But thankfully, I knew that it was the enemy, because the way how God speaks to us, like, God doesn't speak to us, is whenever we notice that whatever the voice that we get in here instills fear, shame, or guilt, you can guarantee that doesn't come from God, right? So I was able to recognize that. So immediately when I heard that, I was like, no. I literally said, shut up, to that voice out loud. And then I walked, and then I went to that Monday morning into the office. So for me, it wasn't easy. And as I was implementing these things in my workplace, one-on-ones with people, it was hard because I really didn't know what it's going to look like. It was a place of unknown that I was going into. There was always that fear factor. There's always the unknown factor. And to tell the truth, there has been a lot of awkward moments as I led those meetings. But at the end of the day, God does what he needs to do and what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And I just become the channel for him to use me. And I cannot let that fear to stop me.
Yeah. Thank you. It's an important testimony for all of us here, because will be awkward moments for us in time that fear takes us, and to see that that is the enemy. I noticed that Sarah's put a question up in chat, but I can't see the question and look at James at the same time. So Johan, could you just read out Sarah's question? Then I'm going to ask James about Avoda. And if others have other questions, please put them up there.
Sarah wrote, there was a phrase you used that summarized your desire for investing in them. Something like fulfill God's design for them. What was that phrase?
If I remember correctly, I think it was something like helping them to live their original design.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things that I said. Yeah, along that line. I can't.
Can you say a little bit more about what that means to you, James?
Pardon?
Say a little bit more about what that means to you, or what that meant to you as you were coaching them.
So the first thing for me, at least from my journey, what I learned is that I have to see the people that I work with through God's lens, and I have to receive God's heart for them and the way how he sees them. So with that heart now, then it changed the entire relationship and the way how I serve the person, right? So it's not just with this knowledge base, oh, I'm just gonna love this person because God loves them. But it's more like I received a direct revelation from God about, okay, God, you created, for example, Jennifer. How do you see her? How did you create her? And I get to learn about her through God, like from God, and also from Jennifer, let's say, right? And then I serve and I help and I invest into the person's life accordingly, right? That's what I mean by serving and helping them to live out their original design, the way how they're created to be.
Yeah. And one of the ways that manifested, James, that you shared with me is that sometimes people weren't necessarily even in the right role for them. And as they shared with you the way God had designed them or whatever, you did your best where you could to redesign roles and to put them into something that was better for them. And in one case, even that meant through discussions with someone that they left because they weren't fulfilling what the way God had created them in your workplace.
Yeah. So there were constantly, as I was having these one-on-one meetings with each staff members, new things will come up that I get to realize their passion, what they're passionate about and what they're created for, how they function. So then I would, in my best ability, I would change their job description and role so that they can do actually the things that they're really passionate about. That actually changed the entire culture of our company and the energy level and the focus, because that really created this atmosphere where we are just energized from within, because we're doing what we're called to do. Yeah.
So Ed has a question, a really good question, important question. Johan, could you read it out, please?
Firstly, thanks for sharing. It is easier to influence business culture as a general manager or as an owner of a company. How would you advise an employee to influence company culture for God?
That's a good question. And yes, it is true that if you have a leadership position and you have that authority, then to a certain way, it becomes a little bit easier for you to apply that. However, this is the thing. So for me, I wasn't the owner. I was a general manager, which means I was a middle guy between our staff members and my CEO. And my relationship with my CEO was actually more important than what I did with my staff, because I couldn't do this without my CEO's approval. So what that means is that for me, I had to build this trusting relationship with my CEO. And it didn't take just a couple of weeks. It took me years to do that. And by this time, when my CEO, when I told him about what's in my heart, he wasn't going to church. I think to a certain degree, he believed in God, but what he did was he trusted me. So he said, yes, James, whatever you want to do it. That's what he gave me, right? So I really believe that regardless of what position you're in, there's something that you can play in, a role that you can play, right? And often the way how God releases that authority is through relationship that you build. So I hope that answers to you. I mean, I think I can go on a little bit more in details, but I don't know if we have time for that.
Well, James,
yeah.
I have a way that maybe you can answer it in a different way too.
Sure.
I'm killing two birds with one stone because, you know, I didn't know what the word avoda meant, and maybe others on the call didn't. So perhaps you can just share. We've got about 3 minutes left before we're going to go into breakout groups.
Sure.
Could you share, what does avoda mean? Why did you pick it for your company? And maybe that's a way of talking about, you know, what we can all do if we embrace that.
Yeah. So avoda, the reason why I chose the word avoda, avoda is a Hebrew word. So in old ancient Hebrew mindset, in this one word avoda, it encapsulates three things: the idea of work, worship, and service. So for ancient Hebrew mindset, there was no separation between work, worship, and service. It was just all in one. So the way how we work is to worship God. The way how we worship is to work for God. And it's a seamless way of living. And the way how I want to really express my heart behind this word is that, again, it's the intimacy with God, right? It's the intimacy. From this intimate relationship with God, there's overflowing, and it outflows into not only our workplace, but everywhere we go. So it doesn't just apply into our workplace. So really, like, avoda means work with God and not working for God. And when we are in this intimate relationship with God, we start to hear his voice, not just for ourselves anymore, but we hear his voice for our company, for our boss, for our coworkers, for our staff members, and even our customers and clients. I had countless, experience in that area too. So when we're living in this intimate relationship with God, now what are the wording, bringing our faith to work becomes bringing our intimate relationship with God to workplace. Right? That is really the context. So, yeah, hopefully
I think that's helpful, because if we take, you had said God had shared with you, get rid of all of your insecurities and fears. Like, I have anointed you as a force for the kingdom, and, invited you. If you have this intimate relationship with me, you can labor with me, and he will show us the way. And I think that's something all of us can apply, is if we think that we are a mantle bearer in our workplace, if we are really stay close to God, then he'll show us the way. We don't need to figure it out all on our own. And if we bring the heart of God into the workplace, others will see that. James, I'm going to just pause for a second here, and we're going to put people in breakout groups so that they can meet two other people and also share what's one insight they're taking away, or something that they'd like to share based on your testimony. We're going to respect the time of finishing up by 12:45, but James will stay on longer. So if anybody does have questions that you want to ask James, and maybe you don't want to ask them in the big group, please feel free to stay on until 12:45. But James, thank you so much. I know there's so much more that you could share, but really appreciate what you shared with us. I know I've benefited greatly from your testimony, and I help others have as well. So we invite you to stay. We're just going to put people in groups of 3 people randomly, and just for 8 or 9 minutes, so that you can share with each other, and then just please come back for a 1-minute wrap up. So James, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, so thank you for coming. As Jennifer mentioned, we're going to stick to our time of ending at 1:45. but we're going to keep the call open. So if you just want to chat, or you want to have you have a question for James or for Jennifer or for Doug or for myself, then yeah, you're so welcome to stay on, and we can have a bit of a conversation afterwards. Yeah, so look out for our emails. We have our next Taking Our Faith to Work session is on April the 26th, and Edmund Vega is going to be this person that we will hear his story from.
So good.
Yeah. Doug, would you mind closing us in prayer?
I'd love to.
Yeah,
all right. Lord, we thank you so much for what you've done in James, and for how it's just encouraged each one of us. We asked that you would do that when we started. Now we just thank you for what you've done. And it is my prayer and belief that each one of us will come away from this having been strengthened and having been given ideas of just how we can be our full authentic self in you and bring who we are fully to you, fully in you to work. So Lord, thank you for James. Bless him. Thank you so much for what you've done in him and the encouragement it's been to each one of us. Thank you for our friends that joined us, and may each one of them be encouraged by you as they work out their lives in the workplace. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great time. Hope to see you soon.
I had a question when it's available to ask.
Go for it,
Can I
Joel.
ask? Right. I came in right at the point, I think, when James was mentioning that the Lord had healed him or healed him of insecurities. And I think that's a big area of ministry, of how we can help our brothers and sisters, how we can help ourselves to overcome that area, because Satan uses that as a huge stumbling block and a huge wall. And when I look at the challenges in the church, often those are big things that are in the way that block or create unnecessary challenges. That it'd be very good to be thinking about how can we help direct people. And I'd be interested to know how long James felt that took him in his process.
Yeah, I mean, Jill, that was actually the most important breakthrough, right? Like without that, the rest of it didn't happen.
Yes,
Because
agreed.
it's all about our identity. It's all about how God's like being restored in the way how God sees us. Because all enemy wants to do is just distort that in any way possible, and that's it. It's game over, because we won't be able to function as how God created us to live unless we get that. So for me, yeah, it took me at least 4 years to get there, right? And it was a tough journey. And you know, there were multiple times where I came home and just tears run through my face, and I just was just in my wife's arms and just crying, because I really felt like I wasn't making any difference, and I was living out of this fear. So for me, my journey was, before I became a force for God's kingdom, I was general manager of the company, but I was trying to please everybody. Because my inadequacy was, I need to do things to please others so that they may think that I'm a good manager, that I'm a good leader. But doing that, I wasn't leading them at all. I was just trying to please them. And it was a tough journey, right? So totally, that is the most important part about this whole journey, and bringing God's kingdom into the workplace. Is the starting point is there. It's not about strategies. It's not about how can we better preach the gospel, how can we better live with Christ-like character. I mean, those things are all important too, but without the identity piece, we get so limited.
Can I ask who helped you get onto that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a series of different things. So I don't think it's just one person per se. However, that weekend, when that weekend happened, it was, the guest speakers who came was from Seattle, in Washington, Seattle, and it's called Identity Exchange. Identity Exchange, yeah. So that was the weekend that it was called. So yeah, that's something you can look it up if you want. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But so I don't know if I am allowed to say this, like Doug and Johan, tell me if I can't. But like right now, that's the heart that God has given me. To so Avoda leadership that I've started last year is about that. It's about equipping and serving marketplace Christian leaders. But not again, the heart is that. Heart is how do we restore our identity, our inner soul issues, so that we can actually live it out. So the Avoda leadership that I'm starting is based on that, and there's the whole heart behind that. Yeah, so that's something that I'm doing right now. Mhm.
Excellent. Because sometimes I just don't think people realize that there's such a potential journey, that God has such a powerful plan. I really appreciate, James, that you mentioned the intimacy relationship. I can't help realizing and seeing that the spirit of fear that I see in even many Christians, as well as larger population, that just the gripping fear. And that's not where God wants us to be. Even though we're dealing with challenges and frightening things around us, he tells us, I think over 350 times in the Bible, fear not. He doesn't want us living in fear. He wants us to be embracing that intimate relationship and the healing and the development and the enjoyment and the worship. That's why I love the word avoda. I'll be looking that up more.
Mhm. Mhm.
Would like to ask about over the weekend I was able to chat with the people who work in Hong Kong, my ex church mate. I find that they deal with a lot of challenge at work, no matter because there are a lot of people, because more people leaving the country, leaving the city to other country due to the political reason. The lack of a lot of manpower, and they have facing a lot of challenge at work. They cannot maybe freedomly speech. And I think right now everybody pray for Hong Kong, for the people who work in Hong Kong, because I can hear their stress. I can hear you talk about intimacy. I think they're so busy at workplace. And most of them, they are professional, could be a teacher, medical staff. So, but then the thing is, I can hear their voice, and really difficult for them right now. So I think here we may not be able to resolve the issue, but I ask you guys to pray for Hong Kong, the people who work in Hong Kong. Yeah.
I really appreciate hearing from people on the ground, like you have access to, because there's a tendency that with sometimes mainstream media questioning what's happening, what is true, what is there for other purposes to mislead people. So it's wonderful to hear from Christians that are connected around the world to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could describe some of the impact that you're forging, sort of a more open relationship with some of your staff. Like how has this affected them and their relationship with other people too, also in their lives at work and maybe outside of work, if you know.
Yeah. So I mean, there are so like different people have different stories, but as I shared, I think I had all sorts of people. For example, I had mature Christian that I worked with in our workplace. I had ex-Christian, you could call it, like who left church a long time ago. I had Sunday nominal Christian, like who only goes to church on Sunday and doesn't really, faith has nothing to do with other parts of their lives. And then non-believers, right? The cool thing was, for example, one of the staff member, she left church a long time ago, and she's the one who had really a lot of depression that she dealt with, and through this conversation that I built this relationship with, she started to open up a lot of her depression and things that she's been feeling. And through that time, I was actually able to guide her to what it means to listen and hear God's voice, right? So So she actually took time in our meetings to pray and ask God. Sorry, there's something. Okay. Anyways, that hearing God's voice, and then she was able to really listen to God and started to understand what it means to have a two-way relationship with Him.
Mhm.
Right. And it really spoke to her and touched her, and that it broke her free to a certain degree. And I also was able to help her to guide her practically to less the anxieties and depression that she feels in our workplace. So that's, I guess, one story. The other guy, like this guy, he had no passion whatsoever when he was working, right? Just in general, he would be the guy who would come at work at 9:10 and then leave the office at 4:55, like first person to leave. And all he would do is always aiming for the minimal work, right? Minimal work. And I actually had a time to sit down for 2 years, the entire journey. And long story short, out of that one-on-one relationship with him, what happened was he realized his reason why he was so lacking in energy and the motivation. And what happened was, towards the end of the journey, he actually, like, my CEO actually wanted to fire him. But because I had built this relationship with him, I sat down with him at the last meeting and I told him, hey, look, this workplace is actually not a healthy place for you, because this is becoming your comfort zone. And this is preventing you from pursuing after what God is for you, right? And when I said that, he knew it from the bottom of his heart. So immediately, he was like, you know what, James, that's so true. And he said, I'm actually gonna give you 2 weeks notice, because I really feel that. And it wasn't out of this bitterness or anything but he knew that I was caring for his life, right? So those are, I guess, some of the things that that I could share. Yeah, like the positive impact that it brought to their lives. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James. That was very good.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to close the call now. Make sure everybody gets back on time for your next meeting. And so great of you to have joined
Yeah,
us.
it's
Thank
really
you.
good. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, James.
Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thanks, James. It was wonderful.
Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.